You are listening to Smart Women's Dating Podcast, episode number 82. Welcome to Smart Women's Dating Podcast. I am your host, certified life coach Lærke Nielsen, and I help smart, independent women attract the love they deeply desire without having to chase or settle. This podcast will give you the mindset tools and insights you need to finally crack the code to your love life. Are you ready? Then let's go. Hey friends! In this week's episode, I have such a treat for you, and I can't wait for you to hear this. I have for a very long time planned to talk about the essential role of friendships and how crucial it is to cultivate and prioritize your friends when you are dating, but also when you are in a relationship, and also when you're single and getting over a breakup and so on. And therefore, I'm so excited to be able to bring you a conversation that I have with Friendship Coach Zayne Khan, who is specialized in helping people with everything related to friendships, including meeting new friends. And I'm not going to talk a lot because I want you to start listening to the conversation, but just a few practical things here because I know once you have listened to this, you want to dive more into what Zayne is teaching. So I just want to point your attention to the fact that in the show notes, I have put all the goodies for you, all the links that you want to click on and explore. There is a link to Zayne's own podcast, which is called Making Friends Made Simple. And there's a link to how you can book a call with him, a free discovery call. There is also a link to a freebie, a free guide on how to meet new friends. And finally, there's of course a link to his website. So all this you can find in the show notes. And if you're listening from a platform with no show notes, then go find me on YouTube at Lærke the Love Coach. You will find all the links there as well. So all that's left to say now from me is just enjoy the conversation. All right, so Zayne, I am so excited to have you here on the podcast. I've really been looking forward to talk to you, and I must admit, you were on my list for a long time of people I wanted to interview for the podcast because you are a friendship coach. And that is, first of all, I have never heard of a friendship coach before I realized that you had that niche and you're a friendship coach. And I think it's so genius and it's so important. And regardless of whether we are single and whether we are single and dating or getting over a breakup or in a relationship, friends are just so important. Friendships are really so important to have a balanced and healthy life and have a good emotional well-being. So maybe I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and share a little bit about what kind of work you do with clients as a friendship coach.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here on this podcast. I love all things friendship. I am deeply passionate about helping folks make more friendships and more meaningful friendships because a lot of us do have friends or even acquaintances, but how many of us can we say where we really have those soul friends, those friends who we can talk to before we go out on a new date, or maybe the date didn't go well and we really want to vent about it, or maybe the date went amazing and we're like, I need my girlfriends to debrief about this and gush about this amazing person who I went on a date with. So it's so important to have friends. I'm so glad that you kind of touched on that, especially in the context of dating, because at every stage in the dating experience, you want to have those friends where you can talk to about the other person. Because if you're talking about the other person, you can't always talk to them about it, talk to them directly, right? It's like you want to get perspectives and nuance. And I am so honored that I get to call myself a friendship coach and help people in an area that's very adjacent to dating. Now that I'm thinking about all the things that I help my clients work through, it would be very similar to being a dating coach in many ways.
I agree. Yeah.
Of course, there are some really key distinctions and nuances, but I'm so honored and happy that I get to do this.
Yeah. I think that this is one of the things I have thought about. There is so much in common between trying to find new friends and trying to find a new romantic partner. Of course, there are also some things that are different, But one of the things, of course, is that we want to really focus on being authentic in order to attract someone who is, matching with our interest, our personality, our temper, our energy, and everything. And in order to be authentic, we all also need to really learn how to love and embrace ourselves. And so I think that is one of the really big key points. And then there's another thing that you talk about on your podcast as well. And I'm going to put a link in the show note to your podcast. It's a very good podcast. I really enjoy listening to it. And I remember there's an episode where you talk about why is it that we are not so intentional with our friendships as, for instance, we are with dating. Like we decide I'm going to find a new partner, we open a profile on a dating app, but we sort of expect friends to be something that just happens organically.
Yeah.
And of course, there are also some people who expect dating to be something that happens organically. But I think more and more it's getting the normal way of finding a partner. So you do something actively, you sign up on a dating app. And I know that an app like Bumble, for instance, they also have a friend category. You can for a friend, but it's somehow just having this intention, finding new friends. It's like it's not something we talk so much about, like for instance, I have a project, I want to find 3 new friends in the coming year or something. I never heard people talk about that. Why do you think that is?
A lot of it is the socialization of even the public school system growing up, right? Where when we're surrounded by folks, there's the expectation that we're going to make friends just based on factors like, the proximity effect, the mere exposure effect, where just being around people will make it more likely that you form that connection with them, right? And when you have that expectation, it's very different than the expectation of being in a romantic relationship. There isn't necessarily that same one where, oh, if I'm just around people in school, I'm going to be in a romantic relationship. A lot of people are just focused on school, right? But even for those folks, you can, make friends at a study group, or you can, see friends after school at the library. But there isn't a same expectation that you're going to make or form a romantic relationship growing up or even in university, right? As opposed to making friends. It's just a given. Friends is kind of something that I think a lot of us take for granted in many ways, where again, just by being around people, we're more likely to make more friends. And when we get out of those institutions like high school, university, college, it's like, wait a minute, this is something I have to put intention behind. Versus a lot of other people are like, well, I never dated anyway, so it's like it wasn't something that there's a big disparity in anymore, if that makes sense. Where with friends, you used to be surrounded by people and now you're not. Versus a lot of people are like, well, I didn't date then and I'm not really necessarily looking to date now in a super intentional way. There's not that big gap of being surrounded by people who you can make friends with. So I think a lot of it is that socialization,
Mm.
right? And I think
Yeah.
that's a huge factor.
Okay. Do you think maybe also if someone would, for instance, I remember once I talked to a friend, I went to a birthday party, I met another of her friends, and we talked about how they met. And she said she found this new friend on Bumble. And I thought that's funny. I never heard about that. And at the same time, I thought it was a little bit sad that she needed to go on Bumble to find a friend. Now I can see in the backlight that that was a bit judgmental because in reality, it's actually really cool to be able to do that. But do you think that we kind of feel a little bit of a shame or something if we don't can naturally have the number of friends that we want at any given time and we have to do something to find them?
Oh, there's definitely a lot of shame because so many of us will talk about, oh, I have these girlfriends from my childhood who we just met and hit it off and it was great. So there's just so much difference in between folks in terms of their past friendship experiences and how they're showing up now with the people in their lives. So, for example, again, with dating, it's like, how many of us hear about high school sweethearts? Like, it's one of those things
Mm.
that's cool, but not so many people have those partners from high school, but a lot of us will have friends from high school, right? And I think there's so much shame because, again, we didn't have to really work for friends if we went through the public school system.
Mm.
But the caveat there is the friends we form in the public school system or even in university, I would venture to say, and even some of the research supports this, is like, because you made a lot of those friends based on just being around them, the quality of those friendships and the true connection you have, you kind of question it a little bit. Because if you're making friends just by being around people, well, how close are you in values really, right?
Mm.
Because we have these scientific phenomenons where, again, around people, more likely to make more friends, more likely to just like them, right? But it's like, what about the values? What about the hobbies? What about when a conflict happens, right? I know for me, I made a lot of my friends by sitting next to them in university.
Yeah.
And those are the friends who I'm actually not friends with anymore now, because it's like I was friends with them because we sat next to each
Yeah.
other. And it was great for a long time. But then when things start to come up and when you start to see differences in values, that's when things get a bit more challenging. Versus the friends that I made after university, where I had to put some intention behind, those are the friends I'm still friends with for, gosh, it's been like 5 years now, and we have a thriving friendship, right?
Mm.
So really looking at where your energy is flowing, where your intention is going, that will dictate how meaningful your friendships are. And yeah, there is a lot of shame when you don't have that. And it's one of those things where I think the underlying belief is, I should not have to work to make friends. And it sounds almost entitled. And I think you used the word judgmental when you were referring to, like, judging someone not to go and
Mm.
Bumble BFF or Bumble friends. But I think it's so understandable that people have that judgment, because society doesn't, again, push making friends in the same way it pushes finding the perfect man.
Yeah.
Which magazine will you see at the store that says find the perfect friend? None of that, right?
No, that's
But
true.
the socialization,
Yeah.
especially for women, brilliant women, is very strong, because they'll tell brilliant women that, you need to find the perfect man. You have your life figured out now. The only thing missing is this man or woman, if you're not heterosexual, right? So
Mm.
it's like, it's really interesting to consider the social messaging we have and the experiences we've had growing up.
Yes, I think that is really, really important what you say there. And just knowing that the friends that we make based on intention, based on actually making an effort, those are friends that last so much longer than the ones that just come to us naturally because we sit next to them. So that's something important to remember. If someone thinks it's too bad, I have to work for it, I have to put intention behind it, that those are actually different kind of connections that have a different quality that might last a lot longer and reflect who you are, and what you believe in and so on. And one of the things that I hear quite often from my clients is that it's so difficult to make friends after a certain age, and probably from the same idea that once you're no longer in school, university, different systems, it's so difficult to meet new people that you can become friends with. And it's actually a big problem for some, because then the dating becomes the social life, or it takes too much space and it's not balanced out by a healthy friendship life. So I guess I know the answer, but what are your thoughts about, is it more difficult to find friends when you're, for instance, after 40?
If you tell yourself it's more difficult to make more friends after 40, it will 100% be more difficult. And I know that sounds like a kind of cliche self-development coachy thing to say, but it's so true. People will say about my city, the city I'm adjacent to, Vancouver, that it's the loneliest city in the
Okay.
entire world. And
Okay.
first of all, I'm like, have you really looked at all the research? But, it's interesting because people make friends in Vancouver every single day. We can venture to say that. So for someone to, like, fall into this trap, this mindset of, this is the loneliest city ever, it's impossible or really difficult to make friends after 40, it's a kind of this sentiment that is being passed around and echoed back to us. So then it just reinforces and reinforces and reinforces to the point where we're in this oblivion of inaction, where we're like, we accept that as a truth,
Mm,
not as a thought, as an
mm,
optional thought or even an optional belief we can choose to adopt or not. I think what would be more useful to say is, there are aspects of making friends after 40 that are more difficult than aspects of making friends in your 20s, for example. that seems and is much more reasonable, and you can work with it a little bit. Now you get to
Mm.
say, okay, what's easier about making friends after 40? Well, now you have again that intention where you know you're expending some time on making friends. You're not just gonna treat it as like a silly little thing that you do where you don't really care about it one way or another. You're putting intention and time and effort into it. And for all the brilliant women listening, I know you have a lot of those listening on this podcast. It's like, well, you've probably accomplished a lot of things in your life that required intention and effort. I would just ask you, like, what was more meaningful for you? The results you created that required that intention and effort, or the results that kind of came to you a bit more easily, right? I think we can both kind of glean what the
Yeah.
answer would
Mm.
be. So I think this idea of saying that it's difficult to make friends after 40 or impossible or way more difficult is really going to keep you stuck exactly where you are. Because, like, how do you feel when you think that? Really probably discouraged, resistant, disappointed. And
Mm.
from those feelings, you're not going to go out into meetup groups. You're not going to see what a beautiful person you've become after 40, where you could share so many beautiful stories and ideas and hobbies with
Mm.
someone else. My neighbor is 80. She goes to pickleball like 6 times a week, and she has made so many friends, and she's super social. So it's like, we know it's not true. Even folks who are really saying it, we know it's not true, but it's a way of keeping us stuck where we are, which from the cognitive kind of evolutionary perspective, we know that's what our brain wants. So
Yeah.
that's just simple
Mm.
statement, but there's so many layers behind it, and I think it's really worth unpacking.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that you have an example of someone who is making new friends all the time at the age of 80. That's just perfect. It never ends. I mean, I think there are some advantages to meeting new friends like regularly because they will reflect your current interests. And if you're someone who's changing and of course, we want to have some friends that stay for a long time, but you can have different interests and different passions, and then you can meet someone who reflects that and where you have something in common on that, and also reflects the level of development and maturity that we have. In some ways, you can say the friends we make after 40, they might actually be someone who, again, like with the intentional friends, that they stick with us longer because they reflect more who we are, and they're not someone where we grew up and we went to the early school class together and then we grew apart, but then when we meet we kind of get back in the old roles. And that's also something that happens where it can be annoying to feel that now you're back in acting like you did back then, or there's a different pattern in a group of friends where it's always the same and it's difficult to get out of, and it's reflecting the way you used to be when you were 15 or something. Where as a more adult, we can meet someone that is really passionate about the same things and see us as a different person because we're a different person now than when we were 15, most of us. There's also another thing that I thought about. Another thing you talk about in one of your podcast episodes is this idea about meeting friends with a specific purpose, or meeting friends where you look for someone that you can do something specific with, as opposed to having this idea that when I meet a friend, I will be able to do everything with this person. But like some people you can have really good, deep conversations with, and others you can go out and have fun, and others again you can go hiking in nature and so on. You can have different activities instead of putting a lot of expectations or almost a pressure on one person, or expecting all your friends to be able to do everything together. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this idea of thinking about friends to do specific things with.
Yeah, it's like, gosh, imagine trying to shop for like the perfect outfit. That's so much pressure versus like finding individual pieces that can all come together and complement each other. You know, that cute hot pink handbag with that pretty dress. It's like, that's so much easier than trying to find the perfect outfit, the perfect friend, right? Because we all have so many different hobbies and values and things that we can share with each other, where it's like, if we're looking for a friend who can tick all the boxes, and this is so similar in ways for dating too, where it's like,
Mm.
sometimes we try and check mark every single thing when we're on a date with someone. It's like, well, finding that like initial chemistry and that initial like vibe where we can have a conversation or laugh together with, that's so important. And yeah, being able to consider, okay, well, this friend could be someone who I exercise with and go for walks and, you know, spend time in nature with, versus this friend is like a really good party friend where we can like host dinner parties together. And this friend is really into, um, card games, so we can play card games consistently with. It's like really fun being open to different friends of different personalities, like even different values to an extent. Of course, there are certain things you want to kind of have consistent across your friendships, but being open to the idea that different people will bring different things to a friendship. 100%.
Yeah. And the more different friends we have that reflects the different kind of activities we want to do, the better relationship we also have with a romantic partner, because there's also this thing about having the idea that this person is supposed to meet all our needs. We are supposed to be able to do everything together. There's a Belgian American psychotherapist, Esther Perel, who
Mm,
talks about how today what we expect from a partner is what we in the past we had a whole village to take care of all these different needs and activities. We talk a lot about how important it is to have friends when you are dating, but also inside a relationship to put less pressure on the partner and have more varied and more healthy, balanced out social life, to have social circles where some of the things that our partner might not want to do, at least we can find some friends who want to do that. So it's not everything on one person. A bit the same with the different friends. Like we have some that we can do some things with, and others we can do other things with, and we can be more open to including different people in our social circle. I actually have a little example I can share where, because I recently went through a surgery myself, I had a hip replacement surgery, and I wanted to find someone I could talk to about that while it was happening, someone who was going through the same, because it's not the same to speak to someone who had it 5 years ago. And so I went into a Facebook group and posted about it. It was a Facebook group for hip replacement surgery. And I asked who else is going to have a hip replacement surgery on this same day. And then there was a girl who said, I am. And so we connected. And so we've been speaking almost every day about progress and how we were thinking about things, if we were worried or not, which has been such a big help. So she's kind of my hip buddy now. I think it's really cool to have someone, to have a friend to go through a specific period. This is, of course, very unusual, but the idea of finding people where we have specific needs in specific times, periods of our life is a very interesting way to meet friends.
yes. Like, talk about specificity. A hip replacement friend having that surgery on the same day, like, and it took a little bit of intention. Like, you went on Facebook, made the post. So it's like, for anyone listening, you can do it too with probably something less specific even than a hip
Yeah.
replacement surgery,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, if so people can do it with such a specific experience, and you can do it as well. And it's so interesting when we consider like what you said about having that intention with different people, right? And if we consider the value of even interactions or friends where we don't talk to them for a period of time after, that is still so valuable. One of the biggest traps so many of the people I talk to, my clients, get caught up in is like, well, Zayne, I don't know how long this friendship is going to last. I don't even know if this will turn into a friendship. What if, my friends, we can see the value of a social interaction or an acquaintanceship for just that? What if even going to a meetup group and meeting a nice person for the night where it doesn't turn into anything? What if we can find value in just that? Because, like, even with dating, a lot of us know at some point that we're not going to stick with the person. And then we have this idea of, like, oh, sunk cost fallacy. And I spent so much time and I wasted so much time on this person. But what if it wasn't a waste of time? Like, what if you were able to glean what you meant to glean from that season of your life?
Yes.
It pains me so much, even more so in dating than friendships, really, when people
Mm.
say, I wasted 5 years on this
Mm.
man or woman. I wasted all these dates, all this time. I wasted my youth with this person. It's like, of course, with dating, there can be a lot of challenging things that happen that cause the relationship to end. But what if you can find the value of that relationship and the good moments and see how you grew through that relationship
Mm.
after it's complete? And what if you can do the same thing with friendships after a meetup group?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's never a waste of time. A social interaction, whether it's dating or friendship, we can always learn something. We can always gain something from it. And I also love the idea of not only talking about making new friends, but also developing the existing friendships, like deepening the connections. How do you, if you have friends for a while and you want to sort of energize the connection, do something to make it more exciting, interesting, or maybe feel more deeply connected to each other? Do you have any ideas? How do you develop an existing friendship?
Yeah, so it would be really interesting to see like where the specific block is, or maybe not even block, but if there's an area in your friendship where you feel like it's kind of getting stagnant a little bit and you want to mix it up. For some people, it's just doing new things. Like there are these really cool cards, like these conversation cards you can get,
Mm.
where like I think one of it is called like going deeper or something, where it's like you play a card and there's like levels of vulnerability or something where you ask them a question based on how deep the question on the card is. So doing things like that, but it doesn't even have to be conversation based. If your friendship isn't really based on a lot of deep conversations, maybe you just go different places. You go to a different park, go to a movie when you haven't seen a movie in a while. Really having those new experiences, but always keeping in mind like it has to be consistent with the commitment and the consistency that you have with that friend, where it's like you don't always want to take it super deep if you have just met the person, right?
Mm.
So letting the time that you've spent with them kind of increase proportionally to the amount of vulnerability and trust that you give that person. And I would say those are the two things, like vulnerability and trust, that really take a friendship a little bit deeper.
Mm.
So, it's like when appropriate, when you've spent enough time with this person, slowly starting to share a little bit more about your life while always being mindful and cognizant of like, not trauma dumping or oversharing to the point where you feel like it's maybe more appropriate for a therapist, right?
Yeah.
So letting the time you spend increase proportionally to the amount of vulnerability and sharing that you give this friend. And really it's like open communication that a lot of us shy away from, where I was just listening to an audiobook from one of my teachers, Shasta Nelson, who's written Friendships Don't Just Happen and Frientimacy. Brilliant books. I definitely recommend both of them. But she talks about like this idea of being really open with your friends. And if a friend said something that bothered you, just having that conversation and saying, like, hey, something you said over dinner didn't really sit right with me. I really want to have a conversation with you. And I think these are the moments where you can really understand if a friendship is like long-term material for you, or even a friendship where you can or want to get deeper with, because it's like when things are going well and you're having fun over drinks or going out for walks, like that's all well and good, but eventually something will come up. And when you can assess how easily or how difficult it is to handle that situation, like that's how you can see the quality of the friendship, what type of friend that you're actually in a friendship with, if they're open to being someone you can have those conversations with, right?
Mm. Do you
Yeah.
think you can have a friendship where you start doing this after many years, someone you've known for a long time, and then all of a sudden you decide, now I want to take it a level deeper?
Yeah. 100% you think
Mm.
you can. I think sometimes we think just as time passes, our friendships will get deeper. And I think that does check out for a lot of folks. So if you're feeling like you just want to take the friendship a little bit deeper, you can even like openly express that, especially if you've been friends with the person for a long time. It's like, hey, I just want to try new things with you, or I want to maybe get to know you even better than I have because I really value our friendship. I see you as such a cool person. I just want to get to know more of you, right? So I absolutely think that no matter how long you've been friends with someone for, you can absolutely take the friendship deeper in a myriad
Mhm.
of ways.
Mm. Yeah. This also got me thinking of the difference between being with one friend, like one to one friendships, and then being in a group of friends. How it's
Mm.
actually very different what you can do together, and where I personally think that if you want to go to that deeper level, you need to see people one to one. to have a deeper personal conversation. And then in a group, usually it's more on the surface, it's more small talk, it's more fun, laughing, going out, and so on. But a different dynamic, which is also really cool in some situations, right?
Yeah, I would say it's so important for you to understand what your needs are as a friend. For me, I prefer one to one or maybe sometimes groups of three, but I struggle when it gets too big. I find that the bigger the group of friends, the less intimate and vulnerable and deep the conversation gets, as you're saying. That's definitely checked out for me. So I lean towards one to one or even three, but occasionally, like a birthday party, I'll do several people, and you're right, more to have that fun time, to laugh, to play games with. But I agree, having that deeper connection, I think one to one is really, really great. There's
Mm.
nothing like just sitting at like a coffee shop or a library one to one with someone facing each other and just having that moment. Though I have found that like three does work to an extent. I just think everyone needs to be on the same page. I have two friends, they're brother and sister. So
Mm.
like that works really well
Yeah.
because like they know each other so well, and we just get to attune. And then another kind of group of three, they're married. It's me and then the two people who are married. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting to consider like different dynamics of friend groups too, where it's like, a group of five people who don't know each other super well versus a group of three people where two are married or two are siblings, right? It's so fascinating.
Mm.
I love it.
Yeah. And you don't feel a little bit like you're a little bit outside when they either are brothers and sisters or they're a married couple?
Not at all. I think at one point I used to, and this is a really interesting point because it kind of leads us into an important conversation, which is like always checking with yourself where you are feeling maybe triggered in a friendship, and you can apply this to romantic relationships too, where it actually has very little, if anything, to do with the other person. So, for example, one thing I had to do a lot of work on is when someone would not reply to my messages, but they'd like see it on Facebook or
Mm.
iMessage or whatever, being left on red. That is something I had to do so much work around. If I hadn't, I would still to this day have a lot of resentment towards my friends because I'm like, oh, how could you leave me on red? Like, we're supposed to be best friends. But when you recognize what your triggers are, and for me, it's like growing up, I really didn't like being ignored, and that's what's coming up for the surface, right?
Mm.
So, for everyone listening, being able to identify and recognize what your triggers are and to process the emotion of those triggers without putting them on your friends or prospective relationships or people you're dating is honestly one of the most valuable skills I could ever teach or share with anyone who's in
Mm.
a
Yes,
situation.
I
Yeah.
agree. So important. But it can be difficult to see the difference, right, between when am I reacting from a trigger and when is it actually something that happened in this situation? When do I need to address something with another person?
Yeah.
So, and maybe sometimes it helps to just take a step back and then wait a day and see how do I feel tomorrow? Did process a little bit differently in my brain? Can I see now it was just a trigger, or am I still feeling that need to address something like the way you said it just before, that thing you said the other day didn't land so well. Can we have a talk about it? And maybe when it's a group setting, there's, for some of us, at least I can say for myself, who's not very loud and not very extroverted, is can be difficult to feel that you are at the same level as everyone else in terms of participating. Because I would usually in a group be observing and listening until the moment where I feel really safe or I feel I know everyone well, unless it's a group of two or three. Then I would feel more comfortable talking. But a group of 8 people, for instance, I wouldn't be speaking 1/8 of the time, for instance. And I also don't want everyone to look at me, and because it feels uncomfortable being the center of attention and so on. There's a lot of things that comes up for me when I think of a group of 8 to 10 people. So I guess it's also a question of the degree of introvert extrovertness and what we feel more comfortable in when we talk about groups and friends. On the other hand, if it's a really big group, like hundreds of people, I don't really care. Because I usually end up talking just to one person, but I don't care that there are so many. I'm not feeling drained by everyone else.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's such a good point, honestly. I think for so many of us, it's useful to see where we're most comfortable before venturing out and trying a friend group dynamic or a number of friends where it's like, whoa, this is really overwhelming. It's like if you naturally gravitate towards one-to-ones or groups of three, then try seeking that out first. Or, vice versa. If you're like, I really just want to have a time out and I want to have some drinks and go partying, then start with, of course you'd have to meet people individually, but like try and join like a group where you can have that experience with, right? It's
Mm.
like first lean into what you naturally like, and then when it feels safe, gradually start to expand that and see, okay, maybe one-to-ones or groups of three, whatever works best for you.
Mm. Mm. And this also makes me think about the concept of friend chemistry, like how well we function together and who we naturally are attracted to as friends. And I guess it can be like a little bit the same as in dating, where sometimes there's another person we think is really cool and very interesting, and we want to hang out with that person, and then we don't really feel that they are reciprocating. But the other way around, someone else wants to spend more time with us, and we don't really see that it's super interesting. What are your thoughts on friend chemistry? Is it something that we can feel instantly, or is it something that, when we get to know each other, it develops a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's like the art and science of friendship, right? Where you have the science beforehand where you're like, these are the things I'm looking for in a friend. And it's, again, different than that really strict checkbox, but it's like, this is a general idea of what I want from my friend, someone who has, a decent sense of humor, someone who I can have deeper conversations with, someone who is even into specific hobbies, because you might be going to meetup groups based on those hobbies. And then that's where the art comes in and the kind of like, less defined version of making friends gets to come into play where you're like, I'm just really hitting it off with this person. Like we're laughing, we're vibing, we have similar senses of humor, and it's just working out really well. But what you're referring to in the contrast is, yeah, this is where we get really comfortable with negative emotion or like the uglier parts of making friends, which is like rejection or a lack of reciprocity or incongruency where you're like, oh, this person is really cool and I want to continue the conversation with them, but they're just kind of turning away, brushing me off, and not wanting to continue the conversation. That is such an important moment where you get to say, you know what? That's just one extra take I can make where I made an effort to try and make a new friend. Like, imagine going to, or even having 100 experiences like that. You're 100% going to make at least one friend the more
Mm.
you go through experiences like that. And I know it's so much easier said than done because so many of us at some point have probably gone through that and have felt really discouraged, be it with friends or with prospective dates. We've probably felt so discouraged where it's like, I just don't want to even deal with this. I'm going to go home. I'm going to watch Netflix, read my book, whatever, right? But
Mm.
being able to say in that moment, this has nothing to do with me. We just didn't vibe in this moment. And now I know I can talk to someone else. Like,
Mm.
I'm here for a reason. I'm at this meetup group for a reason. I can talk to someone else. And like worst case scenario, no one there vibes with you. And then you get to say, okay, that meetup event wasn't for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
What's the next one? What's the next thing I can go to? And I know, again, it's so much easier said than done because you really have to develop that self confidence and that resiliency. And what I want to tell everyone listening is that is something that can be learned and grown and developed. It's not something you're just born with or not. I know a lot of us might think that the ability to be resilient and handle rejection is something that you're either better at or worse at just inherently. I promise you listening, that is not true. You
Mm.
can develop those skills. You are able to get better. You can become what I call like rejection proof. And gosh, I just love this idea of every successful person who you know of is just standing on a mountain of failures. And
Mm.
I know we don't always conceptualize that kind of thing when it comes to friendships, but imagine standing on a mountain of friendship failures where it's like, okay, person brushed me off, person rolled their eyes, person didn't even talk to me at all. You're building up those failures, and at some point, you're going to be on the top of that mountain with the friends that you've always wanted, with people coming to you for advice when it comes to making new friends. So being really mindful of that. I'm so glad you
Mm.
brought.
Mm. And now you mentioned a couple of times meetup groups, but if you were to give like general advice to women out there, let's say they are over 40 and they really want to have just like 3 or 4 new friends. So it's not only about dating, and they feel that everyone else is in a relationship, or they are, they're not that open to making new friends. They already have all the friends they want. What could be some advice you want to share with them?
Oh gosh, I'll give three things. The first is to really challenge that mindset if you're listening. There's so many women after 40 who are married, divorced, widowed, who do want to make new friends. Like, we wouldn't all be having the conversation about the same groups of people if it wasn't such a salient issue. So really challenging that thought, even with some of the things you talked about earlier with the mindset of, okay, if I believe that, how do I feel? What am I going to do? Am I going to make new friends from those actions, right? The second thing is to keep in mind that you want to actually repel people. So if we consider like a magnet, okay, a magnet that is very attractive will also be repelling at the same energy for different kinds of forces, right? I'm not a
Mm.
physicist, but you know what I mean,
No,
right?
but I
The
understand.
force of attraction is going to
Yeah.
be the force of repulsion.
Yes.
So when you attract people really strongly, you will also repel people really strongly. And the key to that is actually being yourself
Mm.
in a very robust, in a very conscious way, right? And keeping that in mind, because a lot of us want to be like this light, lukewarm version of ourselves, but then, we're trying to make new friends and it's really difficult because it's like people don't get to really know us. They get to know a light, kind of watered down version of us, which isn't who we really are.
Mm.
And the third thing I would say is let your hobbies and natural interests guide the kind of activities you move towards. So if you're really into books or you really like dogs, like go to a book club, go to a dog park, right? Go somewhere where you'd already have something that's naturally connecting you to the other people there. That's why I talk about meetup groups all the time, because it's like you're going to be going to a meetup group that naturally interests you. So
Mm.
you already have that connection, right?
Mm.
I'm just in the process of getting closer with um, a friend who I met at open mic. And the first thing that we talked about was music, was Taylor
Mm.
Swift, right? And now that the season of open mic is ending, we are talking about meeting after that, right? And gosh, I don't want anyone listening to think, well, yes, you're a friendship coach, you're making new friends, whatever. It's like, this is the process. I have
Mm.
my social anxieties too. I have my reservations, I have my challenges. And it's like, there is a clear process to go through to making new friends. That's why, the title of my podcast is Making Friends Made Simple. It's not easy. You have to move through a lot of challenges and
Mm.
emotions and things like that, but it is simple. And so far as like the steps to doing it are very simple. So those are the three things. Challenge the mindset that it's difficult, become a magnet, become magnetizing and equally repelling for the wrong type of people. And then the third thing is go to meetup events where you naturally have that connection with people based on whatever you're there for.
Yeah. All right. Those are really, really good advice. And I will also add, if somehow this feels difficult, they can look for Friendship Coach. Because
Yes.
this is what you help people do, right? Find friends, and maybe you can share a little bit more. Do you also help them develop friendships or manage difficulties, problems, conflicts within a friendship? Or what is it more precisely that you work with clients on?
Yeah, most people do come to me to make new friends, but I say all things friendships, make new friends, uplevel your current friendships, or move through friendship conflicts, transitions, and breakups. So anything friendships, I am here for. And it's funny, the free thing I offer is a how to make friends from meetup events guide that maybe you can put in your show notes where
Yes,
people
yes.
can access that. It's a comprehensive guide on how to motivate yourself to go to meetup groups, how to initiate the conversation, how to follow up, how to be approachable. It's a really comprehensive guide that you can access in the show notes. Yeah.
Oh, that is so great. I love that. It's a little present to all the listeners, a little freebie with some guide on how to make new friends. And it sounds like there's a lot of things that are the same as meeting potential partners.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as we were talking. I'm like, oh my gosh, this how to make friends from Meetup guide, you could easily put
Yeah.
how to find prospective dates from meetup events, you know? I can't think of a single thing that wouldn't apply to that. Maybe the follow-up would be a little bit different, but yeah, if you're looking for dates too, I really think that could work. There's a training video to go along with it.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely
Cool.
check that out.
Cool. I definitely will put that in the show notes for the podcast. And then I also will share the different links so people can find you on your website, your social media, and so on. And they can book a call with you if they want to work with you, if they want to know more about what it is you can help them with and how it works to hire you as a friendship coach.
Yes, thank you so much. Honestly, if you're wanting to date, many people will say, and I agree, it's like having those friends and even turning those like friendships into relationships. A lot of people will say you want to be friends first, right? So it's like getting in the energy of meeting new people, having that social confidence, knowing how to communicate in a way that feels, confident but also aligned with who you are. Highly recommend. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, being approachable and being authentic, being ourselves, that is equally important in friendship and in dating for everyone, regardless of the relationship status, as I said in the beginning. And I think it's so important, we can't say it enough. Friendships are so important to balance out all the other things. You get a better dating life, you get a better relationship when you have good friends that you also can, vent sometimes about your partner. So it's not always a difficult conflict, but sometimes I know personally it has helped me a lot to speak to a friend about something my partner did and said, and then we can, discuss it. And then afterwards, I have a different perspective and I feel, okay, it's actually not that bad. And maybe someone share their experience. I used to do this when my partner said that and so on. So in all cases, it's a good investment in all kinds of romantic relationship to have a healthy social circle and lots of friends. And also just long-term health. I think there are more and more studies showing that social life is actually really determining for how we age and how healthy we are when we get older. The risk of different diseases and so on is very much linked to our social life, which is also one of the reasons why I think it should be completely okay to be intentional about seeking new friends and having enough friends to do the things we want to do with. So we don't have to convince someone to do something they might not feel like doing.
I just agree with all of that. We are seeing how challenging it is for people who don't have friends when it comes to health outcomes too. You're
Yeah.
100% right about that. The research is very congruent with that. Making friends is amazing. It's the best thing. I think it's interesting because we see having friends as amazing and having the result is great, but sometimes making friends is seen as like super daunting and scary and challenging. And I understand why that is, but it's exactly what you said, putting in the intention and effort and reminding yourself of kind of what we talked about, the value of those interactions, even if they don't turn into friendships. And yeah, knowing that it's not going to be great if you put all of your time and energy and expectations on your partner. That's going to be really difficult
Mm.
for them, right? So, and for you, right? So being able to understand that you need a balance of friends and you need, of course, a partner too. And just knowing that they serve different purposes, right?
Mm. Mm. All right. I want to thank you for joining the podcast. And I love everything you said. I know this is so helpful for my listeners. And I want to encourage everyone to reach out to Zayne if they need some advice or if they feel that it could be a good choice to work with a friendship coach to actually become intentional with your future friendships. Thank you so much, my friend. This has
Yes,
been
thank you
such
so
a
much for
pleasure.
having me. This has been so fun and connecting and just, me, I could talk about friendships all day long, and I do, which is so great. So
Yeah.
thank you.
So
Appreciate
awesome.
you so
All right.
endlessly.
If you like what you're hearing on this podcast and you want to get support from a coach on your love journey, I invite you to book a free consult call with me. You will find the link in the show notes. And also, don't forget to subscribe. And I would love it if you would rate and review this podcast, and then you'll also help other women find it.